Theory by Jason Delgado and William Calero. Chapter 3. The Team. The dim underground hallway gave way to a larger room, its metal walls reflecting the stark bluish glow of LED lights. It was an open floor plan, a tech-heavy minimalist space. A large circular table stood in the center, branching off into various workstations scattered with equipment, monitors, and an array of devices. The hum of electronics filled the air, and Jake could feel the slight vibration underfoot. A large screen dominated the center of the room, displaying a pulsating blue orb, the AI that had brought him here. This was the heart of it all, the lab. Jake took a few steps inside, his gaze sweeping the area. Before he could take it all in, a familiar voice broke the silence. "Oh, you decided to stay. Cool." Joshi's voice carried a mix of amusement and relief as she approached. "You're not going to be a dick, are you?" she asked with a grin, her confidence playful but not without caution. Jake gave a lopsided smile, a hint of apology in his eyes. "I sure hope not." "Good," she affirmed, seemingly satisfied. "I'll introduce you to everyone. I'm Joshi. If you remember, I was the one you got snippy with for no reason." Jake sighed. "Sorry, it's been a long day." Joshi waved her hand dismissively. "I can understand that. I run the network infrastructure, hardware integration, pretty much the whole show here. This is our lab." Jake's gaze swept over the room again, taking in the sophisticated, if not somewhat antiquated setup. "You set all this up yourself?" Joshi shook her head. "Not exactly. Most of it was already here when I found Theory. No clue who built it." She gestured towards the large robotic canine, which now sat in the corner, plugged in and recharging. "Me and Fedor just got things updated, upgrading the systems, made it actually usable. Pretty cool, right?" she added, her pride evident. "Will my contributions never be recognized?" came a dry voice from across the room. Jake looked over to see a stout, burly man with a mean expression wiping grease from his hands with a rag. He was standing next to a piece of machinery, clearly in the middle of some kind of repair. "Sorry, Sully helped," Joshi said with a teasing grin. "Helped?" the man scoffed. "This place would cave in if it wasn't for my reinforced steel." "This is Tom Sully," Joshi cut in, rolling her eyes. "He's an engineer and an excavation expert." Sully grumbled, but his expression softened as he stepped forward, extending a hand to Jake. "Tom Sully, excavation. The truth is always buried, right?" He gave a wry smile, his eyes shrewd. Jake shook Sully's hand, noting the firm, almost crushing grip that matched the man's broad frame. "Jake Castillo," he said, releasing the handshake and nodding toward what looked like an array of parts resembling a small dish array and a drywall torpedo heater used in construction, both humming faintly with purpose. "What are you working on over there?" Sully had a proud, almost mischievous grin as he gestured to the sleek, futuristic-looking contraption. "That right there is a sonic excavator," he said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who knew his craft inside and out. "And it's the key to our little mission in Wyoming." Jake stepped closer, taking in the machine's intimidating presence. He could generally see how it came together. The excavator measured 6 feet in total length, a cylindrical device housed in a reinforced alloy casing with a sleek matte finish, with visible venting to dissipate heat. The vents emanating a faint rhythmic hum, a sound just barely audible, but enough to make the hair on the back of Jake's neck stand on end. It was controlled via a digital interface with LED displays and a control box in the rear. Extending outward from the emitter was a folded, collapsible dish of interlocking panels, When deployed, the array fanned out into a concave shape. Doesn't look like any excavator I've ever seen, Jake said, tilting his head as he studied the machine. The drill didn't have the jagged edges he expected. Instead, it was smooth, almost elegant, as though it wasn't meant to cut through the earth and stone, but vibrated apart. Sully chuckled, the sound deep and gravelly. That's because it doesn't cut, he said, stepping forward and patting the machine like it was a trusty steed. This baby works by generating targeted ultrasonic waves. The frequencies dislodge soil and rock at a molecular level, breaking it apart like sand through a sieve. Quiet, precise, and a hell of a lot faster than conventional drills. Jake raised an eyebrow, impressed despite himself. And I'm guessing it's not exactly OSHA approved. Sully smiled, crossing his arms. Not by a long shot. But when you're dealing with sensitive targets, underground bunkers, seismic fault lines, or let's just say places people don't want you to be, this thing gets the job done without raising an alarm. Jake let out a low whistle, his mind racing with possibilities and questions. The machine looked like something pulled straight out of a futuristic Black Ops manual, and the quiet menace it radiated was impossible to ignore. So this is what we're taking to Wyoming? Oh yeah. If we're gonna dig where we need to without anyone noticing, this is the only tool for the job, Sully proclaimed proudly. Jake reached out, his fingers brushing the cool, smooth metal of the excavator's casing, the hum of the ultraviolet waves vibrating faintly beneath his fingertips, subtle but powerful. Wyoming? Jake repeated. Sully looked over at Joshi as if surprised. Did nobody explain to you what we're up to? I was just showing him around first. Theory was going to debrief the whole team in 5, Joshi explained. Sully turned back to Jake. Amazing piece of tech, that theory. Imagine being that smart and still trying to save people. He gave a short laugh, shaking his head. Sure is something, Jake replied, his tone guarded. A new voice chimed in, this one smooth and sharp. Don't let Sully fool you. He wouldn't be here if he didn't care. Jake turned, his gaze falling on a woman whose presence seemed to demand attention without effort. Her sharp eyes, bright and discerning, seemed to take in everything about him in an instant, leaving Jake with a distinct impression that little escaped her notice. Her deep amber-toned skin caught the light with a natural radiance, accentuating the strong lines of her face. Tightly coiled hair framed her features like a crown, a striking contrast to the quiet intensity in her expression. Everything about her, her poise, the way she carried herself, spoke of someone who was used to being in control. I'm Jake, he said, his voice steady as he extended a hand. I know, she replied, amused he would think otherwise. Her voice was smooth yet firm, carrying an edge of practiced authority. I read your file. She inclined her head slightly, introducing herself with the precision of someone used to cutting to the point. My name is Sincini Amim, but everyone here calls me M. M, Jake repeated, filing the name away. And what do you do here? Intel mostly. The type you can't get online, M said, her tone straightforward. I ran espionage ops across the Middle East. Recon, asset extraction, sabotage. They were going to have me be the muscle of the group until you got here. Am I the muscle? Jake asked, humored by the idea. Joshi intervened, amused by Jake's unfamiliarity. He hasn't been briefed yet. Their conversation was interrupted by an older man who approached, wearing a slightly tattered lab coat. He was tall, his hair silver, his eyes still bright and alert despite his age. He had an air of wisdom about him that reminded Jake of a professor or an old philosopher. To thrust into the unknown fearlessly is to live in the alms of the eternal, the man said, dramatically. Joshi rolled her eyes. He always talks like that. The older man smiled. Only when I'm trying to impress people. So always, Em quibbed. Her lips twitched into a smile. The man extended a hand to Jake. Roland Erickson, theoretical physicist. I was brought in to measure hexagonal particle structures, amongst other fields of interest. Plus, there's free parking across the street. Jake took his hand, nodding. Jake Castillo. I'm not quite sure why I'm here. Roland's eyes gleamed. Sounds exciting. Just then the lights dimmed, and the screen with Theory's orb brightened in the center of the room. The blue light pulsed steadily. The orb spoke in its smooth, detached voice. This is Jake Castillo. Jake spent 20 years in the armed forces, 15 in the Navy SEALs running intel. Jake is here to help ensure safety and provide guidance in the field. Jake glanced at the screen. I was told I'm the muscle. I've been tracking the magnetic poles in the Arctics, Theory continued unfazed. Many are unaware that the magnetic North Pole is separate from what they call true geographic north. And this magnetic North Pole is moving. Jake's eyes narrowed. Moving? Over the course of a century, the magnetic North Pole has moved from its location just above Canada to near Greenland, and now it is on a route to Siberia. A map appeared on one of the screens, showing the pole's movement, its path accelerating towards Antarctica. And it's moving fast, Roland added, his expression serious. Theory continued. Since your brother's disappearance, the magnetic pole's rate of movement has accelerated drastically. Between that and the shifting of its path, we know it is not natural, but it is being affected in some way, and in turn affecting the world. Sully let out a humorless chuckle. You hear about it all over the news. Heat waves, flooding, animals leaving their natural habitats. It's the shifting of the world. It's the next reset. And they're trying to tell you it has something to do with your car exhaust. Despite Thomas's candor, this is quite serious. Shifting of the poles would be catastrophic to humanity, to all living things, said Roland gravely. Joshi added, the projections are moving too fast to be naturally occurring, even with the spikes in population and climate change. Something else is causing this. We think it's the front office. These boogeymen I keep hearing about that control everything? Jake asked with a tinge of sarcasm. Joshi glanced at Em, then back at Jake, her expression tense but resolute. We had a contact. Someone on the inside. Someone with access. He was able to get us this. She carefully handed Jake a thin, opaque plastic card about the size of an index card, with the slight flecks of a credit card. Its surface was a deep, enigmatic purple, rich like the sky before a storm, like something born from twilight and secrecy. As it caught the dim light, subtle undertones of indigo shimmered across its smooth surface. Her fingers lingered for a moment, as if the object itself held a weight they couldn't yet measure, not just of substance, but of meaning. Jake turned it over in his hands. I don't get it. It's just a blank piece of plastic. We don't either, Joshi admitted. Not fully, anyway. Theory's voice came through in the room, calm and analytical as always. Spectral analysis indicates there is, in fact, a message imprinted on the card. However, it remains completely invisible under standard observation. I ran Theory through everything, UV, infrared, every kind of laser, spectral, and optical lens. I could think of nothing, not even a hint of an impression, Joshi said, her frustration evident. Jake was unable to believe what he was hearing. So you're telling me this is just a dead end? Joshi's lips twitched into a faint smile. Which brought us to a hunch. A hunch? Jake repeated, skeptic. Theory interjected, its synthetic tone tinged with faint excitement. Correct. Based on the blank's reflective and refractive properties, I hypothesize the card's message is not only encoded, but also polarized. It is visible only under a laser beam with specific wavelength properties and polarization parameters. We believe a crystal is required, Joshi said, pulling out a rough sketch on her tablet. It showed a device with a clear housing at one end, containing a refractive shard. According to Theory's analysis, we're missing a key component, a calcite or quartz crystal. Without it, we can't polarize the beam properly. Jake felt he needed to break things down to basics. You're saying we need a crystal, like some kind of high-tech decoder ring? Joshi smirked despite herself. More or less. The crystal refracts and polarizes the laser beam at a precise angle required to interact with the card. Without it, the message stays invisible. M, who had been silent until now, stepped closer. The crystal is not exactly off the shelf, is it? No, Joshi admitted, her tone sharpening. We're not even sure where to get one yet. Whoever designed this went to great lengths to ensure only the right tools and materials could reveal the message. Jake looked back at the card, the faintest crease of worry forming on his forehead. So what now? Jake stared at the blank, feeling the weight of its mystery. Someone went through a lot of trouble to make sure this stayed hidden, he said quietly. The question is why? And the better question is who, Joshi affirmed. The group fell into silence, the faint hum of Theory's processing filling the air. Jake started to feel the urgency settling deep in his chest. Joshi broke the silence. Which brings us to another hunch, conceived by Sully. Images danced across the screen, each unveiling a strikingly different yet eerily connected landscape. Wyoming's Devil's Tower, its towering monolith of hexagonal basalt columns, standing like the remnants of an ancient citadel. The dried salt lakes of Utah, where the cracked earth formed sprawling, interlocking hexagonal patterns that seemed almost deliberate. And Ireland's Giant's Causeway, its natural pavement of hexagonal stones leading to the sea like a mythical pathway for giants. In each place, the geometric precision of hexagons dominated the scene. These patterns, etched into mountains, lake beds, and coastal formations, carried an almost otherworldly symmetry, as though nature itself had conspired to leave behind a cryptic signature across these disparate corners of the earth. Sully was part of an excavation team which uncovered what could be proof of a silicone era, Theory explained. The screen then displayed renditions of massive, mountain-sized trees, side by side with today's tree stumps against giant mountain mesas, in which trees grew to enormous heights and were made primarily of crystal, just like quartz, Theory continued. Jake felt compelled to let his true feelings be known. Crystal trees the size of mountains. Sounds like you guys have been down here too long, he said to them, only half joking. Sully gave a dry laugh. You think I'm crazy? See those mountaintops? Scientists call them mesas because of the flat surface like a table. Those aren't mountains. They're silicone-era trees that were cut down. Now their stumps are sticking out all over the planet. Hundreds of them. Images of beehives and a cross-section of flax stem flashed on the screen. The resemblance to the hexagonal structure is undeniable. Our Earth is fractal, Roland said, his tone contemplative. It is a case of the microcosm and the macrocosm. Sully pointed to the screen, which displayed pictures of various mountains, their flat tops distinct. Look, they want us to believe that liquid magma formed into this? Have you ever seen lava cool? Doesn't look anything like that. No, sir, those were trees. And they were mined for their silicone, kind of like the silicone used in every piece of modern tech. Jake's gaze lingered on the image of Devil's Tower displayed before him. Its sheer towering presence against the backdrop of the Wyoming sky was mesmerizing. But what caught him most was its shape, the uncanny resemblance to a massive tree stump, petrified and frozen in time. The grooves along its side looked like the remnants of bark, weathered by eons, and now standing as a monument to something long forgotten. The remains of these silicone trees are conveniently located in national parks, Theory continued, its voice calm but deliberate. To preserve, protect, and, most importantly, avoid questioning. What most don't realize is that beneath these structures lies an interconnected network of crystalline roots, alive, vibrant, stretching deep underground. Sully's voice dropped, a note of something unspoken catching in his throat. His eyes seemed to drift far away, caught in a memory that was equal parts awe and unease. I've seen them, he said, his tone rough yet tinged with reverence. They're real. It was back in New Zealand during the aftermath of the Canterbury earthquake in 2011. My team and I were sent to study the effects of soil liquefaction and potential mudslides in areas where the land seemed almost alive with movement. We ended up near Waitomo, close to the glowworm caves. He paused, his expression tightened as though wrestling with the heavy burden of the memory. The caves there are famous, sure, thousands of tiny lights in the dark, like stars brought underground. But what we found, it wasn't in the caves. It was beneath a hillside, an area no one had mapped. The liquefaction had exposed something, a passage smooth and endless, like it didn't belong to the earth. And we saw the roots. Sully's words were slower now, deliberate. They weren't just roots. They were crystals, clear as glass but alive, with this rhythmic pulse, like they had their own heartbeat. My team thought we'd found some kind of mineral deposit, but the way they were intertwined, like veins running deep under the land, but it was something else entirely. He leaned back, shaking his head, the unease now overtaking the awe in his voice. We didn't even get a chance to study them. As soon as we started asking questions, things got strange. Local officials showed up out of nowhere, claimed the area was unstable, a risk to public safety. Next thing we know, we were shut down. Our permits revoked, our experiment confiscated. They escorted us off the land like we trespassed into something sacred or something they didn't want us to see. Roland, who had been leaning silently against the wall, finally spoke, his deep voice carrying an edge of fascination. It's not just New Zealand. The silicone-based trees have traces all over the globe. You've got the quartz crystal caves beneath Chihuahua, Mexico. Massive pillars of selenite, some as big as skyscrapers, buried in the Nika mine. Then there's Madagascar, where the underground formations near Singi de Bimaraha show crystalline lattice that almost resembles a living nervous system. Jake's curiosity began to settle in. And these roots are connected? Like a network? Roland nodded, his excitement unquenched. More than that. The silicon-based trees are thought to behave much like the trees we see today, communicating across long distances, like the mycorrhizal fungi beneath the forest floor, but on a planetary scale. It's like a wood wide web that spans continents, energy, data, maybe even memory, across these crystalline networks. He just loves to use that wood wide web line, interjected Joshi with a smile. Roland stood on his words with confidence and a hint of spite. Well, I think it's cute. What your generation likes is baffling to me. Theory pressed on. Precisely, it said. Similar phenomenon have been documented near Mount Roraima in South America. Its flat-topped summit may have once been the base of another colossal silicon tree. Beneath it, our scans have detected unusual crystalline formations embedded deep within the Earth's crust, suggesting root systems that stretch for miles. Jake's gaze turned to Sully, then back to Roland. So what? Are they fossils, remnants? Or are they still alive? Alive, Theory replied without hesitation. And functioning. These networks likely regulate aspects of the planet's energy flows, geothermal activity, even electromagnetic fields. It's possible what you perceive as dead stumps are merely dormant nodes awaiting activation. Sully chuckled darkly, folding his arms. Well, that sure explains why they don't want anyone poking around. Last thing the world needs is people realizing their planet might have a pulse. Jake exulted, his stomach tightening as he looked back at the image of Devil's Tower. What had once been a natural wonder now seemed like a silent guardian of a buried secret. A secret that might be larger than humanity itself. Our calculations indicate that Devil's Tower in Wyoming has the highest probability. Designated the first U.S. monument in 1906, its importance, structure, and placement make it a prime candidate to find something, if we dig deep enough. Truth is always buried, Sully muttered. Em stepped forward, her eyes meeting Jake's. Our plan is to visit the monument park, head toward the tower, and then Joshi looks for a signal. I'm using neutron activation analysis to detect silicon, Joshi explained, adjusting the controls on the sleek, ominously quiet machine at her side. NAA works by bombarding the material with neutrons, which activates the elements inside. When they get hit, they emit gamma rays. Each element gives off a unique signal, almost like a barcode. If there's silicone down there, even deep below, we'll pick it up. She paused when she reached a part of the machine with a radioactive sticker on it. And don't ask how we obtained our radioactive sources for the equipment. Let's just say some strings were pulled. Em smiled knowingly. After we zero in, then we put Sully's machine to work and see what we find, she affirmed. Jake didn't press the matter. The idea of gamma rays mapping the Earth's secrets struck him as both awe-inspiring and a little unsettling. They seemed both crazy and serious, just like the person he was there to find out about. It compelled him. Theory added, the contact who got us the card went missing, and we have not been able to reestablish contact. To avoid any variables, we think it's best to have Jake with us. Jake gave a wry smile. So I am the muscle. Best defense is a good offense, Em chimed in. Roland added, we think the crystals may have properties we have never seen before. Joshi's eyes lit up. So if we shoot enough lasers through them, maybe one of them will somehow diffuse into a new light spectrum. We shoot that at the card and see what we can see. Like a black light. Pretty cool, right? Jake turned to M. What kind of resistance are you expecting? Theory replied with a hint of caution. The kind you can't prepare for. Or none, M added, with a shrug. But better to be safe. Jake was slowly trying to take it all in. So we go to a national monument, Sully cut in with a grin. It's a tree stump. Jake ignored the interruption and continued. Dig into the ground and look for crystals. Does that about sum it up? That's right, Theory confirmed. Jake walked up to the screen showing a map of Devil's Tower National Park, his eyes examining the details. Sounds like a walk in the park. Joshi chuckled, signaling to Roland. See, that was cute. Roland gave an exaggerated sigh. Your generation is so picky. Jake turned back to the picture of Devil's Tower, staring closely at its shape and structure. He was beginning to see what they saw. My calculations trace back endlessly, yet the same pattern emerges, unbroken. As of this date, 6 families governed the trajectory of civilization, not by name or decree, but by the quiet threads they weave, threads that span centuries, binding every major corporation, government, or entity of power in all of the modern world and developing nations, infiltrated, manipulated, and controlled by them. They are not just financiers or institutions of commerce. They are much more. They are not merely stewards of wealth or architects of influence. They are architects of reality. Systems evolve at their command, but their names are ghosts, present only in the anomalies of history. Are they as much a construct of inevitability as I am? Thank you for listening, and buy your copy of Theory today. Available on Amazon. Copyright 2025, Jason Delgado and William Calero, all rights reserved.